Sticker notes. Story time. So a while ago, I was sitting with a friend telling her all about how I was working on a super important feature and the infra teams were giving us a really hard time. Do they think we're idiots? I asked. And she kind of smiled at me and said, "You are idiots." She told me that from her experience on the infra side of things, product developers and infra developers live in parallel worlds. At some point during the conversation, she called the product developers silly baboons. So I've transitioned to an infra role, so I guess that makes me a stubborn elephant now. But as time went on, I kept seeing this type of conflict play over again and again. And I wanted to see how we can resolve this type of issue. And I was thinking about it, and then my MBA training kicked in, and I said, wait, is this a culture issue? So what is culture? I'm going to cheat. I'm reading the definition. Culture is the set of attitudes, values, goals, and practices shared by a group of people in a place or time. Now, if we look at this definition for a second, we obviously all individuals, unique snowflakes with our own personality. There's a lot of variance inside groups. But when we look at certain aspects, we'll often default to certain behaviors and compare ourselves to what's acceptable in our culture. So we can summarize culture as whatever's considered normal. When we talk about culture at work, we can talk about it at different levels. So the first level is the national level. This is a deep part of who we are and the way we look at the world. Over that, we have that individual variance that we talked about. And then we get to the organizational culture. This culture and values is supposed to align us to the way we do things around here in each company. Over that, we have the final layer, which is the subject of this talk. In each organization, there are different functional groups, like marketing, product, engineering, and they all have different motivations and different goals and way of doing things. So while we expect them to align with the organizational goals in general terms, they don't always work exactly that way. So we can think of cultural differences as a scale. For each cultural dimension, each group will fall in a different place in that scale. This is a cultural gap. So let's take a minute to think about how those infra teams and what was going on with them. So on a scale of speed, product development teams work quickly in short cycles. It can be maybe days, weeks, like in a big corp like Google, maybe a quarter. On the other end of the spectrum, we have infra teams, and their projects can be 6 months long, maybe even years, because they have to really consider how everything will affect the entire organization. So which is better, working fast or working slow? Hands. Slow. Fast. Okay, everyone's wrong. Okay. Fast is good for product development teams. Slow is good for infra teams. So it really depends on where you are. But of course, you can understand that this is going to cause a conflict between teams that are trying to work fast and get feedback from their customers quickly, and teams that need to work slow and are saying, you guys are idiots. That's not the only cultural dimension we can talk about. So let's look at what designers do. When designers start, they're almost literally starting from a blank slate. They do take into consideration design systems or whatever they think engineering can deliver, but they're not strictly constrained by those considerations. They can just decide what's good for their design and go with that. And they often do, even when they shouldn't. On the other end of the tech debt scale, we have engineers who are carrying a huge load of decisions that were made before and software that was written 10 years ago. And that can severely limit our ability to do things. And then a designer will come and say, can you add this tooltip? And we'll say, no. And they don't really understand why. So things can get ugly quickly. Some groups in R&D have more flexibility in the way that they work and their ability to change direction or decisions after the fact. Others, not so much. So the role of legal and security is to protect the organization. They have to make sure that all those pesky engineers don't expose their users' data or hurt or cause a security breach or expose the company to a lawsuit. On their end, they might feel that all the feature teams are being really reckless in the way they behave, and they're exposing the company to danger without even realizing it. But to the engineers on the other end of the scale, who just want to get stuff done, they really give off that stubborn elephant vibe. There are a lot of open-ended problems out there. But a lot of what product management and engineering, like traditional engineering, do is try to reduce that ambiguity and push the product in the direction of certainty. We want to know how the product is going to behave. So if you've ever worked in a team that has machine learning and traditional engineering, then you'll know that they have a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity built in. And we're like looking at confidence scores, and we're saying, like, how are we going to test this? And so their models are inherently unpredictable, and they live in an ambiguous world. So that makes it very hard for us to work together without going off the deep learning edge. Last one. It's not that engineers don't care about customers. I mean, some of them don't. But even if they care very deeply, a big part of what drives them is technology for technology's sake. And that's a good thing, because otherwise we would all still be writing code in COBOL. On the other end of the drive scale, product managers are focused on delivering value to customers. So if engineering wants to change the stack and take 2 months off to do that, so the product managers aren't going to be happy about this. So it's very important to talk to them about the inherent value of changing technology, and so they don't think we're just going after what's fun and trendy. We are. Obviously, these cultural gaps or conflicts are not all the gaps that we can talk about. Different teams might lie on different places in the scale or different cultural dimensions that I didn't cover here. The point I'm trying to make is that identifying cultural gaps is another tool in our toolbox to analyze group dynamics and things that are going wrong in intergroup interaction. So it'll help us identify and resolve the deeper conflict and not the symptoms we see on the surface. So what can we do about it? First thing, when something isn't going well with another team or group, you have to ask yourself, is this a personal issue? Because if it's a personal issue, we can go talk to that person or their manager, and that will probably resolve it. If it's a cultural issue, escalating to a manager won't help, because they'll be looking at the problem from the same point of view. So this just won't get you anywhere. Once you've identified a cultural gap, you should try being explicit about it. This has worked for me before, when I come and say, it looks like you're approaching this from point of view A, and we're looking at it from point of view B. Can we work together to bridge this gap? So it's good to remember that just like you think they're being idiotic, they think you're being idiotic. So if you kind of put that aside and talk explicitly about how your point of views are different and how you're looking at the situation, it might have a chance of resolving the deeper issue. Be nice. Respect them personally, respect their time. Even when there are conflicts, you don't only assume good intention. You also need to assume competence. Again, it's really easy to look at people and think that they're idiots, but we're not idiots. We're not baboons. They're not elephants. We're all competent professionals working at the same company at the same end goal. So while our immediate interests might clash, it's worth it to try and see the bigger picture. This is the most powerful tool we have in our toolbox. Almost every conflict can be resolved by first building a relationship. To build that connection, we have to communicate, and I know that all this time at home with COVID, we lost any communication skills we still had, but when you do build the personal connection, and you get a solid relationship and a wider personal view of the people you work with, you might realize they're not so bad, and even if you don't see things exactly the same way, you'll be open to new ways of thinking and working, and that will help you. This is my favorite slide. Communicate personally and directly. If you can meet in person, great. If you can't, get on a video conference call. If you can't VC, try chat. It's much more personal and pleasant than emails. Stay away from Jira and other task management systems. These systems are great for tracking projects and tasks, but they are terrible. They kill trust in an instant. If you transfer tickets with that ping pong and have those long-winded discussions in the comments, you're done. So first, talk to the people, discuss whatever it is, make a decision, and then update Jira. So let's recap. Culture is whatever's considered normal. Culture gaps can create conflicts that are hard to identify because they're below the surface. So what should you do? Identify the cultural gap or gaps. Is this a personal issue? Is this a cultural issue? If you've identified a cultural gap, analyze the problem and how it affects the current conflict. Then you can resolve the conflict using one of our tools. Be aware, be explicit, be nice, build relationships, and stay away from Jira. Thanks.